And greetings, boys and girls around the world. This has to do with the EPA in a way. It turns out the EPA is a front organization working for Obama. The guy, John Beale, who went to prison for impersonating a CIA officer, is part of the subterfuge. Gina McCarthy was his supervisor for years and years and years. He couldn't hardly fool her. She's in on the scam. John Beale was overseas negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which I'll tell you about after we take a look at Gina McCarthy explaining the mission of the EPA.
Work around climate change, because there's been a lot of discussion also. Is it your view from the administration that you have sufficient data to back the work that you're doing around climate change, that in fact it's happening and that there are certain causal effects that would enable you to do rulemaking in that area?
I believe that I have a wealth of data that is more than sufficient. I believe that the Supreme Court has agreed with me, which is nice.
Great. And so can you tell me about some of the rulemaking that you're engaged in going in that direction, and then relate that to the mission of EPA of protecting our public health and the environment?
Yes, the President's Climate Action Plan identifies mitigation opportunities, reductions in greenhouse gases, as well as addressing adaptation, and then international issues. EPA is to some extent involved in all three. But I think the most important I want to get at is our opportunity to reduce greenhouse gases so we can try to mitigate significant impacts associated with increased emissions and higher levels of climate change. And so what we are really looking at is, first and foremost, regulating greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector, both for new facilities and existing. We have already issued a proposed rule for new facilities, and we're beginning listening sessions and discussions on how we best put out a proposal next June for existing facilities. The reason why we want to do this is that climate change is not an environmental problem. It's a serious public health and economic problem, as well as an environmental challenge. And so what happens with a changing climate is that the weather gets hotter. When the weather gets hotter, the ozone levels increase. When the ozone levels increase, your kids go to the hospital more often with asthma. In this country today, 1 out of 10 children have chronic asthma. We are talking about a serious public health challenges. Allergy seasons extend. We are seeing health impacts from different types of mosquitoes and other vector-borne diseases moving north as the weather gets warmer. Things are changing, and things are not changing for the best in terms of public health in a changing climate. It threatens the health, safety, and well-being of communities and individuals. It's something we must address now.
Do we need to spend $20 billion a year on 2,000 additional EPA employees to manage the regulations and the paperwork submitted by power plants, all because of asthma, which turns out to be a very manageable disease?
Is it your view from the administration that you have sufficient data to back the work that you're doing around climate change, that in fact it's happening and that there are certain causal effects that would enable you to do rulemaking in that area? Is it your view from the administration that you have sufficient data to back the work that you're doing around climate change, that in fact it's happening and that there are certain causal effects that would enable you to do rulemaking in that area?
The purpose of that graphic I just showed you, all the blue squares, is to show you that CO2 in its entirety is insignificant, and only a small part of that is what has been put into the atmosphere by the United States. And even if we reduce our CO2 emissions the rest of the world will quickly overwhelm that small reduction because they are turning toward coal burning power plants with a vengeance. They've got to have electricity. This is typical of what goes on in the Obama administration. Many of my subscribers are very aware of some of the issues that have been raised by the House Oversight and Reform Committee in regard to the IRS targeting of the Tea Party conservatives, in regard to the Benghazi cover-up. We don't know why Chris Stevens was in Libya. We don't know why Susan Rice went on all the talk shows afterwards and said it was a spontaneous demonstration that went out of control because of a video. We don't know what Chris Stevens was actually doing there, but they obviously tried to blame it on a video rather than a terrorist attack, a planned, coordinated terrorist attack. Maybe Obama was there to transfer weapons from Libya to eventually fall into the hands of the Al-Qaeda linked militants that are trying to overthrow Syria. And it's obvious by now that Obama is changing governments throughout the Middle East as though he wants to surround Israel with a more powerful, better positioned enemy. This deal about climate change, the EPA is obviously involved in trade negotiations, nothing to do with their mission, all under the guise, the smokescreen of climate change, carbon emissions mitigation because of little children with asthma and allergies and mosquito bites. You see a whole lot of CRAP is going on in the Obama administration. John Beale, who supposedly fooled everybody at the EPA, was actually working with Gina McCarthy and others, covertly carrying out Obama's agenda. Obama will make sure that Beale is comfortable. He wanted to sit around and read books anyway, and now he'll have a chance to do that. So we should focus our attention now at this point on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a secret, super secret negotiations involving international trade. Here's a graphic to give you just an oversight of what this Trans-Pacific Partnership involves. Hopefully you can see here that this refers to TPP, regulatory coherence, deleted by John Beale, so we can't read it. This is an attachment to the bottom of an email that eventually ended up with John Beale, and you'll see that he requested it from Gina McCarthy. It was sent to several people by Joe Ferranti, Senior Advisor, Trade and Economics Program, Office of Global Affairs and Policy, Office of International and Tribal Affairs, US EPA. The Environmental Protection Agency involves itself in a wide range of activities. Joe Ferranti sent this to several people, including, and you see it refers to USTR, that's the United States Trade Representative. Joe Ferranti sent this to John Beale, Jim Jones, and so on, including Scott Fulton. Scott Fulton sent a copy to Gina McCarthy, who in turn sent another copy to John Beale, who already had it. Notice the date, February the 1st. Here is an email dated the day before, January the 31st, where Beale originally asked for information from Gina McCarthy that led to her sharing the information about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the U.S. Trade Representative. And this is supposedly a goof-off who hides from his boss, who is incognito. She doesn't know the guy, doesn't ever deal with him. She has no way of knowing that he's a CIA spy. Yet she seems to be in touch with him on matters that have to do with international trade. And this guy is supposedly traveling around the world on CIA business, and he took the fall for it. Yet it looks to me that Gina McCarthy knows exactly what John Beale is involved in. She knows he's not working for the CIA. That's just a story to tell low-level people. He's actually working on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which really is a matter that involves the State Department, which would be Hillary Clinton and Ambassador Kirk, K-I-R-K.